Discover the amazing transformation of a grandma, a touching tale of revenge and hidden rebirth. The dusty shelves of the library were Mabel's sanctuary, where the gentle scent of old books wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. At 68, she had settled into a rhythm that sought not change, but solace. Yet, today, the familiar surroundings buzzed with a strange energy, urging her toward the forgotten box tucked in the corner, the heirlooms she hesitated to catalogue. As she lifted the lid, her heart raced. Within lay the remnants of an old life, and at the top, her grandfather's journal beckoned. With shaking hands, she opened it. Each ink page revealed secrets of a family legacy long buried, a tangled web of whispered words and unfulfilled promises. But as Mabel read on, the thrill of discovery turned sour. Her brother had taken it all: the estate, the honor, the memories, convinced she was too frail and too complacent to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Did he really believe her age would dictate her worth? Guilt twisted in her mind, a relentless whisper taunting her to submit to his judgment, to remain the overlooked grandmother in the town she had always known. What began as a simple agreement to sift through family relics now felt like the beginning of a war she never wanted. Tension thrummed painfully in her chest, and doubt crept into every corner. What if she was too late? What if she truly was unable to face him in court? Dread wrapped around her thoughts like barbed wire, squeezing tighter with every turn of the page. Yet somewhere beneath that mounting fear, a flicker of rebellion ignited. For the first time in years, she yearned to fight not just for her rightful inheritance, but for her dignity, especially after all those years spent dismissed by her own flesh and blood. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mabel's resolve solidified. She would not allow her brother's arrogance to dictate her actions anymore. The legalities of property and contracts would drown in her newfound determination. Driven by this newfound fire, she approached Jake, a young attorney, his fresh energy both intimidating and invigorating. With his help, she delved deeper into the law like a detective unraveling a thrilling mystery. Their conversations crackled with intensity. He challenged her assumptions, stirred old dreams she had buried, and for the first time, Mabel felt uninvited excitement igniting her existence. But the mounting pressure bore down upon her fragile state. Would this audacious pursuit cost her everything, even the tranquility she had fought so hard to preserve? Mabel's breath quickened, her mind racing as she imagined confronting her brother in court. What if he laughed in her face? Would everyone see her as a fool chasing a delusion? The courtroom loomed, a dark abyss waiting to finally expose her weakness to all. As the gavel fell with a thunderous echo, tension gripped the air, and her brother's smirk flashed like a blade. Mabel steeled herself, her heart pounding against her ribs, bracing herself for the battle ahead. The stakes were not merely about property anymore, it was about reclaiming her voice, her past, and the dignity she had lost long ago. She was teetering on the edge of a transformative moment, and as memories of her grandfather's voice whispered in her mind, true strength comes from within, hope flickered in the midst of encroaching despair. Would she finally summon the courage to redefine her legacy, or be thrust back into the shadows once more? The answer hung tantalizingly close, yet forever out of reach, as her future teetered on the brink of realization. Mabel sat in the courtroom, the air thick with tension. Each tick of the clock echoed like a drumbeat, quiet yet relentless. Flashes of uncertainty danced in her mind, taunting her like the shadows of an old ghost. But determined not to be consumed by fear, she anchored her thoughts on the pages of her grandfather's journal. It urged her forward, reminding her that her legacy was not merely an inheritance of land but one of strength and perseverance. As Jake prepared their case, Mabel paid close attention to every detail. She felt the weight of evidence, a delicate balance between the past scars and her present intentions. Each line he drew on a whiteboard that mapped out their strategy held more than legal meanings. There lay her resolve, her desire to reclaim not just property but also her voice and dignity. Her hands trembled slightly as she absorbed his insights, feeling the profound shift within herself. She was no longer the passive observer of her life, she was becoming the architect of her destiny. The day of the hearing arrived amidst a miserable drizzle, grey clouds suspending the sun as though they too recognized the gravity of the moment. Mabel's stomach twisted with anxiety. Each lawyer, including her brother, filled the room with formidable gravity. With every glance at her brother, the smirk he wore made her heart race with unresolved rage. How could he think this was over? How could he assume her silence for weakness? It was infuriating. Yet as she listened to their arguments, clarity began to wash over her. In his words, she discovered not just their position but her brother's underestimation of the bond she shared with her heritage. With every citation from the journal that Jake tossed into the fray, Mabel felt a surge of purpose. The old struggles, insignia of her unrecognized strength, surfaced through the newly written narrative they were constructing together. True strength comes from within, she had told herself repeatedly, but it wasn't until now that those words resonated with her being. Before stepping up to give her testimony, Mabel paused, catching a glimpse of her reflection in the courtroom's polished wood. No longer was she the fragile grandmother eager to retreat into the shadows. She saw a woman who had weathered storms and held a history worth fighting for. The moment she took her place at the stand, the gravity of her intent crystallized in her chest. The questions came, probing into her past and decisions. With each response, memories flooded back, her grandfather's laughter echoing in her ears, her mother's tears, and her brother's confident snickers that had for too long rendered her small. Now, she spoke firmly, her voice steady as she laid bare not only the facts but also the emotional tapestry of her family's life. She navigated every question, revealing the legacy her brother hoped to obscure. The resolve that surged within her shifted the dynamics of the courtroom. The murmurs of disbelief rippled through those present. She was no longer the underdog but a contender. In that enclosed space, snippets of her life hung in the air like testimony, reclaiming each piece with fierce determination. But even in victory's grasp, doubt remained. Would her family's legacy be healed or further broken? As her words flowed, they morphed into a call for dignity rather than a mere battle for land. Her heart raced, casting shadows of anxiety amidst the flickers of triumph. As the judge leaned forward, Mabel sensed the turning tide and the fragile nature of her situation. What if her brother countered with ferocity unmatched? What if she had awakened a beast she wasn't prepared to face? The deliberation was only the beginning. Mabel's heart raced, knowing she stood on the precipice of change. Everything was at stake, and as anticipation thrummed in the air, she could feel that this was more than a courtroom battle, it was a defining moment poised to either solidify her evolution or dim her rekindled spirit. The weight of her family's legacy rested not just on her words but on the choices yet to come. Would she find the strength to confront her brother once and for all, or would the struggle lead her to an even darker place? Mabel's heart thumped violently against her ribs as the judge, his gavel poised like a loaded weapon, considered the arguments presented. The air felt electric with the weight of silence, each tick of the clock punctuating her mounting anxiety. She had delivered her testimony, revealing her truth, but now the precarious balance rested in the hands of the deliberating judge and the weight of familial expectations pressed heavily on her. Her gaze flickered toward Jake, who was rifling through papers, a tempest of emotions storming behind his calm facade. Did he truly believe he could strike her down with mere legalities? Mabel's shoulders squared, the memories of her grandfather's words swirling within her, fight for what is right, Mabel. Never let the tides carry you where you do not wish to go. It was time to confront the currents threatening to pull her under, yet she found herself paralyzed by doubt. Through the haze of tension, visions of her past life floated to the forefront. She had always been the mediator, the peacekeeper, haven Tishi. A grandmother playing tranquil to harmonize the discord. But to quell the chaos inside herself now, she had to embrace the turmoil rather than avoid it. Here was her chance to transform her fear into strength, her sorrow into a rallying cry. She began to plan her next steps, her mind racing beyond the courtroom walls to the home she had nurtured, the legacy she had protected, and the woman she was now becoming. As she took a deep breath, Mabel realized there was an even deeper revelation waiting in her heart. She wouldn't allow her brother's arrogance to dictate her fate. In the process of demanding her rightful place within the family storyboard, she unexpectedly discovered her own capability to assert herself. She was skilled at crafting words into powerful tools. In that moment, standing united with Jake, she was illuminated with a truth she hadn't fully embraced until now. Words have power, perhaps even more than law, she whispered to herself, refocusing her resolve. She could articulate the injustice that had persisted for far too long. She would confront her brother not just with evidence but with heart. The realization crystallized her intention. This wasn't simply about property, it was about reclaiming her identity, asserting her voice in a world that sought to silence her. When deliberation ended, the judge's verdict echoed in the quiet courtroom, but it wasn't the outcome that set Mabel's heart racing. It was the understanding that she had finally begun to unleash the dormant strength within herself. She had confronted her fears, recognized her worth, and grasped the minuscule thread of agency that had flickered in her core. Yet a shadow loomed in her mind. What would happen next? Her brother's voice had been a whisper of torment, often convincing her that thorns hid beneath flowers. The time had come to face the entrenched resentments head-on, she concluded. The idea of confronting him directly, without the barriers of legal representation or childhood familiarity, filled her with both excitement and trepidation. In the days that followed, Mabel threw herself into her work, crafting a meticulous outline of her thoughts, preparing for the confrontation that awaited her. She had transformed not just as a woman but as a force of nature, ready to dismantle the remnants of a past that sought to contain her. All that stood between her and liberation was the face-to-face reckoning, the confrontation that would define not just the outcome of this case, but who she would be moving forward. At the brink of her evolution, the echoes of her grandfather's strength filled her heart with warmth. She wouldn't shrink from this battle anymore. As she walked through the door of her home after a long day, her voice surged with clarity. She was ready to face her brother. But the question loomed large: would she be brave enough to share her true thoughts, and fight for her identity beyond the courtroom? Mabel took a moment to steady herself, knowing the next conversation would challenge everything. The horizon of what lay ahead was nebulous yet invigorating. She felt it, the moment of truth was nearing. Mabel's mind raced, tangled in anticipation as she sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of tea that had long cooled. The familiar surroundings felt strangely foreign, the walls of her home echoing memories of conflict and unresolved pain. She had opened the door to a new chapter in her life, and yet, lingering doubts threatened to close it again. Each breath was an exercise in fortitude, reminding her of the strength she wanted to embody. She glanced around the kitchen, a repository of warmth and familial joy. Perhaps it was this very space where she had felt most secure, and yet it was also a stage for the conflicting emotions she was about to confront. The scent of cinnamon lingered, a reminder of baking with her grandmother, an anchor to a time when she felt valued and cherished. As the clock chimed, Mabel knew it was time to shift from memories to action. She had crafted a narrative not just through her testimony in court but also through the choices she was now making. To reclaim her voice meant asserting herself in even the most intimate settings, especially against the shadow of Jake who loomed over her like a specter. Their confrontation had to happen in a neutral territory, no grand declarations, just honest dialogue. Mabel picked up her phone and hesitated, fingers hovering above the screen. Would calling him ignite another round of sibling rivalry, or was it a bridge she could cross to mend the fissures in their relationship? The fear of rejection gnawed at her resolve, but the memory of her grandfather's words pulsed through her. She dialed, the phone vibrating ominously against the table. "Hey, Mabel," Jake answered, his voice steady, almost devoid of emotion. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice stronger than she expected. "Sure." "When?" "Tonight." She plotted her words like chess pieces, determined to be both open-hearted and assertive. This was not merely an exchange of grievances, it was a declaration of her existence, a chance to reclaim her narrative from the ashes of their combined history. The sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow that danced through the kitchen window, a fleeting moment capturing the paradox of hope and fear. Mabel arrived at the cafe ahead of time, her heart a drum of uncertainty, each tick pulling her closer to the inevitable confrontation. When Jake walked through the door, a familiar mix of defiance and brotherly concern etched on his face, Mabel felt the rush of memories flood her senses. They had once been allies against their parents, united in mischief. Now, the same intensity buzzed between them but had morphed into something more volatile. "Coffee?" he asked, not bothering to engage in pleasantries. "Yes, that would be great," she replied, noting the tension in his demeanor. She could sense that beneath his casual facade was a simmering hostility, driven by past grievances. Once they had their drinks, they settled into a booth in the back, a pocket of semi-privacy in a crowded space where her voice wouldn't be too loud but could still carry the weight of her truth. "We need to talk about what happened," Mabel opened, forcing the words out as if they were jagged stones in her throat. "Think this is just about the house?" Jake shot back, his voice rising slightly. Mabel would no longer shrink from his outbursts. She needed transformation, and she aimed to extract the roots of their discord. "No. It's about us, about how we've been defined by this narrative of rivalry. I want to rewrite it," she countered, emboldened by her intentions. Jake's eyes narrowed, but the surprise on his face suggested her assertive stance had thrown him off balance. "I've always felt like you were running away from conflict. But now, here you are. What has changed?" he asked, skepticism lining his tone. It was a tantalizing opening. Mabel took a deep breath, ready to explore her burgeoning resolve. "Everything has changed, Jake. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm done letting you dictate my worth." In that moment, it dawned on her this confrontation was not merely a familial obligation, it was the resurrection of her autonomy. She could not predict how Jake would respond. Would he grasp the olive branch she offered? But the question remained, could she articulate the depths of her change before him, or would her voice falter under the weight of years of conditioning? Just as the words danced on the edge of her tongue, the cafe door swung open again, and the future pulled her attention. The arrival of an unexpected guest sent ripples through her composed facade. Would this disrupt her pivotal moment, or could it be the catalyst for a deeper revelation? Mabel's heart froze as the door swung open, the bell chiming cheerfully in stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. She was not prepared for who stood in the doorway, their estranged mother, Kelly. Time seemed to distort the room, blurred, and the noise of the cafe faded into a dull hum. Kelly, with her carefully styled hair and designer coat, looked every bit the polished matriarch. The last time Mabel saw her, they had stood in a different kind of silence, one filled with accusations and pain. "What are you doing here?" Jake's voice sliced through the moment, unguarded and almost defensive. Mabel sensed the tension radiating from him, the visceral reaction to their mother's mere presence. "I came to check on you both, but it looks like I've interrupted something," Kelly replied, her tone just slightly too light, disguising the gravity of the situation. No, you haven't interrupted anything. Mabel's voice was steady, shaking the remnants of surprise off her frame. She gathered her thoughts, realizing that this was her stage, not just to confront Jake but to redefine her relationship with both him and their mother. It was time to be the architect of her own narrative. Actually, we were just discussing what happened at the house, Mabel continued, locking eyes with Jake, seeking his support, though she felt the scales tipping between them. I think it's vital that we address everything that has been unsaid, including what you did, Mom. Kelly's expression flickered for a split second, the mask slipping as a combination of annoyance and defensiveness flared. This isn't the time, Mabel. I didn't come here for this. But Mom, for once, let us actually talk. Mabel leaned forward, the quiet resolve in her voice gaining urgency. It's not just about the house. It's about how your actions pushed us apart and how I refuse to keep letting that dictate my life. Both Jake and Kelly stared at her, visibly taken aback at Mabel's sudden shift from quiet to commanding. In that moment, she acknowledged the gravity of her actions, as fear and fury battled within her. Her determination burned fiercely, a protective fire against the memories of childhood neglect. You think you can just walk in and act like it's all normal? Jake interjected, frustration edging his demeanor. You left. You chose to leave us. Mabel needed to break the cycle, she couldn't allow this moment to slip away. We are all carrying this weight, Jake. Every single one of us. But if we want to move forward, we have to air these wounds. That means confronting the truth. Kelly's composure faltered. You think I don't feel bad about how things turned out? I did what I thought was best. Life isn't always black and white. Mabel recognized the familiar deflection that had kept them in a stasis for years. And that is what I'm talking about. It's too easy to dismiss our pain as a consequence of your decisions. I need you to own your part, Mom. Not just for us, but for yourself. A long gaze passed between them, the echoes of past complaints, resentments, and stained memories filling the silence. There was a weight in the air, something raw, palpable, and ready to crack open. As Jake shifted uncomfortably, Mabel saw the crack in his tough exterior. His eyes flickered through a spectrum of emotions, grappling with conflicting loyalty and unwritten desires for reconciliation. You're right, he said finally, perhaps unexpectedly, but it doesn't change the hurt. We need to figure out if we can truly face each other. The three of them were caught in a web of expectations and histories, the stakes rising like tension stretching a bowstring. Mabel felt the power of shared pain all around them, constricting yet blooming with potential. What if we made a pact? She proposed, her voice breaking through the tense air. Let us choose honesty from now on. No more sidestepping. No more pretending. Are you serious, Mabel? Jake scoffed, but Mabel's gaze didn't waver. Yes. I refuse to be defined by the past anymore. But only if you both are willing to try too. A moment of silence rested heavily among them, ripe with possibility and uncertainty. For the first time, Mabel felt that perhaps they could step onto a new path together. The surrounding cafe noise faded back in, yet she found herself anchored in that space, a sense of determination forging her resilience. Her heart raced with anticipation, both of the potential for healing and the fear of looming failure. But this time, the call to transformation was stronger than the fear of what lay ahead. As she awaited their responses, the vivid reality of choice surged through her. Would they join her in this revolution? Just then, an unexpected voice broke through, one from Mabel's past she thought had vanished. The barista approached their table, his expression unreadable, delivering a strange piece of news that could change everything. Mabel's stomach dropped. Would this new revelation become either their bridge or a wider chasm? Mabel's focus shifted from her mother to the barista as he approached, his brow furrowed with apprehension. The quickened pace of her heartbeat pounded in her ears, drowning out the vibrant cafe sounds that buzzed around them. She scanned his face for familiarity, but years had clouded their shared past into vague memories. What could he possibly want? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just heard something that you should know, he began, his voice steadier than his hands. Mabel's pulse quickened further. It felt like an unwelcome intrusion into the already fraught atmosphere. Jake turned slightly, irritation flashing across his features, while Kelly's demeanor shifted to keen interest. What is it? Mabel prompted, leaning forward, bracing herself for news that she feared could distort the fragile moment they had just begun crafting. It's about your grandmother, he continued, each word dropping with weight. She's back in town. I saw her at the grocery store yesterday, and she mentioned looking for you. A tangible silence enveloped the trio, the revelation rippling through them like a stone thrown into still water. Mabel's mind raced. Her grandmother had been a ghost in their lives since her mother cut ties with the family years ago. Memories flooded back, the whispers of family gatherings when love had seemed foolproof, before the collapse. What does she want? Jake's voice cracked through her reverie, skepticism coloring his tone. After all this time? Honestly, I didn't really get much more than that. Just that she wanted to reach out and make amends, the barista replied, a cautious sincerity in his eyes. Mabel felt a swell of emotions battling within her. The idea of her grandmother returning produced a spark of longing but also resentment. Could she trust someone from the past, when each familial connection had been tainted by abandonment? Maybe she understands what has happened, Kelly suggested, and for the first time, a flicker of openness appeared on her face, although she still barely concealed her defensiveness. Mabel shot her mother an incredulous glance. Or maybe she just wants to exert control again, to sweep in and pretend everything is fine, Jake interjected, crossing his arms defiantly. The deep-rooted feelings of anger and betrayal resurfaced, threatening the fragile ground they'd just begun to tread upon. Mabel took a deep breath, weighing her instincts against hesitation. This was not just a matter of reunion, it could be a reckoning. We can't ignore this, Jake. If Grandma is in town, it opens a door. One we can choose to walk through or close forever. But what if it's just more hurt? He pressed, the boyish anger he often displayed tempered by a hint of fear. Heart-pounding, Mabel squashed the instinct to retreat. We cannot be afraid to face it. We have been silenced for too long. Maybe this is our chance to confront our past fully, as a unit. The air around them felt charged, and Mabel's bravado surprised even herself. The idea of digging deeper into long-buried family issues both excited and terrified her, but she resolved to embrace the unpredictability. This revelation could lead them either to renewed connections or deeper chasms. We should at least hear her out, Mabel declared, her voice resolute. I refuse to let our history keep me from growth. Being afraid won't me be better. As the words left her mouth, she felt a shift within herself, a determination blooming that she didn't know existed. Mabel was more than an unwilling participant, she was the architect of her own narrative, and for the first time, she could feel its profound potential stretching out before her. Jake glanced at his mother, then back at Mabel, uncertainty clouding his expression. Kelly remained silent, contemplating, her guarded demeanor wavering. I go with you, Jake finally said, though a storm brewed behind his eyes. The barista nodded, his presence felt abruptly supportive. If you want me to arrange a meeting, I can help. Just let me know what you decide. Mabel nodded, equal parts anxious and resolute. The new path unfurled before her, rife with possibility. Would this opportunity be the catalyst for their healing, or merely an echo of old wounds? Yet, even in the thick of her uncertainty, Mabel sensed a transformation, a burgeoning courage guiding her. If her grandmother was back, perhaps it was time to visit the unhealed places in her heart. As they left the cafe, Mabel felt the weight of the world behind her, yet the beckoning light of potential ahead called to her fiercely. The question lingered in the air like an unbroken promise: were they ready to confront the ghosts of their past, or would this latest revelation fracture the tentative reconciliation even further? With a deep breath, Mabel realized that confronting her grandmother might just be her greatest test yet. The stage was set for an encounter that could either solidify their new pact or tear their fragile unity apart. Would she be ready for the truth that awaited? Mabel's mind raced as she and Jake left the cafe, the sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Every footstep felt heavy, as if she were leaving behind pieces of herself. She could hear the echo of the barista's words. Make amends. What did that even mean after all these years? Are you really okay with this? Jake asked, breaking the silence. There was an edge to his voice that made Mabel stop and reconsider her resolve. She was about to face a layered past that had been entrenched in sorrow, anger, and unanswered questions. What choice do we have? Mabel replied, although the certainty in her tone wavered. We can't keep avoiding the uncomfortable truths, Jake. We're not kids anymore, and it's time to confront it. But even as she said it, doubts gnawed at her. It felt like a brave face over trembling fear. Jake fell silent, and she could feel his hesitance radiating through the air between them. Mabel wondered if he felt the same surge of determination or if he was simply marching into a battlefield completely unaware of the consequences. Arriving home, Mabel immediately retreated to her room, needing space to gather her thoughts. The scrap of paper with the barista's number was still clutched in her hand, a tangible tether to the inevitable confrontation. In the quiet of her sanctuary, she began to sift through her memories, the laughter of family gatherings, the warmth of hugs that had disappeared as quickly as they had come. The unresolved fracture in her family began to resonate anew. Before she could spiral into her fears, Mabel opened her laptop, driven by a compulsion to understand her own feelings. She began typing out her thoughts, turning this uncertainty into a raw stream of consciousness. I refuse to let fear dictate my journey, she wrote, solidifying her commitment to personal growth. But can I trust her after all this time? She paused, letting the words settle against her heart. This wasn't just about her grandmother, it was about Mabel stepping into her own power. It was about breaking the cycle of silence and reclaiming her voice which had long been muted. In that moment, she felt a surge of confidence. Perhaps her grandmother's return could be a catalyst for her understanding of self-worth. If she could meet her grandmother with questions instead of accusations, could that mark a change in how she approached all her relationships? The thought ignited something deep within her. The timeline of their family's split began to unfold in her mind's eye. Mabel could see all the moments her mother had crumbled underneath the weight of resentment and fear. Was this not a chance to break the cycle, not just for herself, but for her mother as well? A profound sense of responsibility washed over her. There was so much left unsaid in their lives, and it was time to stitch together the fragments into a narrative that could heal. As Mabel closed her laptop, the decision solidified inside her. She would call the barista. She would take that final, daunting step towards her grandmother. But what if the meeting turned sour? The rapid-fire questions populating her mind felt like arrows aimed at an invisible target. What if her grandmother had no intention of making amends? What if this were merely another come-and-go cycle of hurt and neglect? Her heart raced again, uncertainty crashing against the fledgling determination she had generated. The night loomed heavy ahead, and Mabel felt on the precipice between two worlds, one defined by the past and the other shaped by the choices she was now willing to make. As she stood by the window, staring into the darkness beyond, she resolved that she would not go into this confrontation unprepared. If she sought answers, she had to be ready to confront her own feelings, her own shortcomings, and the truths she had concealed from herself. Mabel prepared to make the call, but as she dialed the number, a sudden pulse of anxiety swept through her. Was she truly ready to embrace what might lie beyond that threshold? The moment hung in the air, pregnant with the potential for both healing and heartbreak. As the phone rang, she took a deep breath, aware that the path she chose could change the trajectory of her life entirely. The line clicked as somebody answered, and Mabel felt the weight settle on her shoulders once more. Could she navigate this encounter with grace and authenticity, or was this the dark turning point from which there would be no return? Mabel's heart pounded as she heard a soft, inquisitive voice on the other end of the call. It was the barista, the very link to her grandmother. "Hello," the stranger said, and Mabel felt her breath hitch in her throat. Something inside her wanted to retreat, to hang up and preserve the fragile cocoon of her decision-making, but the growing resolve within wouldn't allow it. "Hi, it's Mabel," she stammered, forcing the words out despite the intensity of her emotions. "I was told you were the one to talk to about my grandmother." A moment of silence stretched, and Mabel couldn't tell if the barista was taken aback or carefully considering her answer. "Oh, yes. I remember you mentioned her the other day. I can get you in touch with her if that's what you're looking for." Mabel felt her voice falter as she continued. I want to know if she's willing to meet with me. I need to talk." The barista hesitated, and Mabel could sense the weight of the moment. "I can ask, but you should know it's complicated." "Complications don't scare me anymore," Mabel replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The words echoed with a surprising conviction, fueled by the realization that the past did not have to dictate her future. "Okay," the barista said slowly. "I will reach out and let you know what she says." After they finished the call, Mabel collapsed onto her bed, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She sought clarity, reflecting on the journey ahead. She recognized that making this call was only the first step. What about the meeting itself? Would she be brave enough to voice the questions that clawed at her? In the days that followed, as she nervously awaited the barista's reply, Mabel buried herself in a whirlwind of preparations. She began to journal more purposefully, crafting letters filled with every unsaid thought for her grandmother. Each entry turned into unyielding truths about hurt, love, and the desire for connection. This exercise not only helped her articulate her feelings but also revealed her deep-seated need for closure, a craving that had festered unattended for too long. With each passing day, Mabel noticed changes in herself. The anger that used to bubble at the surface began to feel distant, almost manageable. She was unearthing a resilience that surprised her. She was no longer the frightened child fearing abandonment, but a woman determined to confront the sources of her pain. This inner transformation was palpable, and with it came a newfound capacity for self-love. Yet awkward knots of anxiety coiled around her stomach every time she contemplated what questions she would ask her grandmother if the meeting happened. Would she demand answers, or would she seek to understand? The juxtaposition of confrontation and compassion felt intense, but it was a reflection of her evolving self. Then, on a chilly Thursday morning, just as she sat down to pour her coffee, her phone buzzed with an incoming message from the barista. Heart racing, she opened it. She wants to meet. Tomorrow afternoon at the cafe. The words blurred momentarily as Mabel's mind flooded with different scenarios. What if their encounter spiraled into chaos? What if she broke down completely? Yet a tantalizing sense of determination urged her on. Mabel felt the pull of destiny. This was an opportunity, a turning point where she could shatter the silence that loomed over her family. She had chosen her path, and now, she must walk it with courage. As she prepared for the meeting, she couldn't shake the weight of her own questions. They loomed large, overshadowing her hope. Am I ready? Became a resonating theme deep within her. The stakes weren't merely about reconciling with her grandmother, they were also about reclaiming herself in the process. Mabel's gaze swept the room. It no longer felt like just a place of retreat. It was a sanctuary of growth and courage. The clock ticked ominously, seconds folding into minutes, propelling Mabel closer to the conversation that awaited her. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her notebook, flipping it open. To the letters she had written, searching for clarity amid the chaos of her thoughts, preparing not just for this meeting, but for the rebirth of her own voice. As the evening dusk began to settle outside, Mabel faced the darkness ahead with an unyielding spirit. She was ready to confront not only her grandmother but the past that had tangled her in fear and doubt. And deep down, she knew the moment of truth was fast approaching. The sun crested the horizon, casting a warm light that beckoned a new possibility. As Mabel checked her reflection, the woman staring back at her didn't seem as uncertain as she had just days before. Today, she was adorned in a simple yet powerful outfit that felt right, each piece a testament to the resilience she had unearthed in the preceding weeks. Adjusting the collar of her shirt, she embraced the nervous excitement bubbling within. Today wasn't just another day, it was a culmination of years of unanswered questions and suppressed emotions. The cafe loomed in her thoughts, the site of her confrontation. As she arrived at the familiar spot, her heartbeat echoed in her ears, each beat marking the tension hanging in the air like static. She stepped inside, the aroma of roasted coffee beans swirling around her, grounding her while also heightening her anxious anticipation. Would her grandmother arrive? Would they speak, or would it end in silence? Mabel settled into a corner, choosing a table that gave her a view of the entrance. She could feel the collective energy of chatter and laughter bouncing around her, a stark contrast to the heaviness she felt. Was she ready for this? The question dangled before her like a pendulum. She flipped through her notebook, tracing the cursive of her earlier reflections. The letters had evolved from mere expressions of emotional turmoil into a source of strength. They were now reminders of the real Mabel, a woman not just seeking closure with her grandmother, but a woman daring to reclaim her narrative. The time for caution had passed. Today was about confrontation, clarity, and connection. And then, as if summoned by her persistent thoughts, she saw her grandmother. Time had etched itself onto her features, but the familiar grey hair and sullen posture told Mabel that this was the woman who had once held power in her young heart. A surge of emotions washed over Mabel: fear, anger, and a flicker of hope. She steadied her breathing, pushing through the buoyant energy that flared at her core. This was the moment she had waited for. Her grandmother approached with the hesitancy of a stranger, eyes darting around as if searching for escape rather than connection. Mabel's pulse quickened, the air thick with tension. "Hi," she managed, her voice a tremor that waded into the river of awkwardness. "Hi," her grandmother echoed, the word barely leaving her lips. The air crackled with an unspoken history they both carried, a burden that felt nearly insurmountable. "Can we talk?" Mabel's voice steadied into purpose, each word a brick laying a pathway for dialogue. Her grandmother nodded slowly, sinking into the chair opposite Mabel. The moment felt immense, teetering on the edge of infinity. Mabel's fingers twisted the edge of her notebook, her heart racing as she contemplated where to begin. The questions she had penned so painstakingly now flooded her mind in chaotic disarray. "Mabel, I didn't expect," her grandmother started, a flicker of fear glazing her eyes. "Neither did I," Mabel interrupted gently, this time with soft conviction. She felt the innate power surge within her as she realized that the fear she had harbored for so long was flimsy, now dry and brittle. "But I need answers. I need to know why." The words hung in the air, heavy and palpable. The cafe, which had felt so warm and inviting moments ago, now encased them in a vault of unspoken pain. Mabel's grandmother sighed deeply, her facade wavering as if she was bracing for impact. "It's complicated." Mabel hated that word and the way it often sidestepped the core issues. She leaned in, sensing this was her time to gather her courage and drive the conversation. "No more complications, please. Tell me the truth." With those words, Mabel crossed a threshold. She wasn't just seeking dialogue, she was demanding it. A cascade of emotions mingled in the air: shame, regret, and perhaps a glimmer of a long-forgotten hope. In that moment, Mabel felt the gravity of her decision. As her grandmother's eyes glistened with impending tears, Mabel sensed a shift. Was it possible that within each fragile admission lay the potential for profound healing? Her grandmother opened her mouth, about to divulge secrets that had remained in the dark. Mabel braced herself for whatever was about to unfold, her heart pounding with trepidation and expectation. But just as the first words left her grandmother's lips, a sudden interruption shattered their fragile moment: an unexpected arrival, a figure from the past. Mabel's breath caught in her throat. Who was this, and what would their presence mean for the fragile connection she was trying to forge? The path before her twisted once again, and her heart raced with anticipation and fear. The time had come to face not only her grandmother's truths but also her own buried revelations. Would she have the strength for what lay ahead? Mabel sat in the cafe, poised on the brink of transformation as she faced her grandmother, her heart echoing the silent promise she had made to reclaim her narrative. The unexpected arrival of a familiar figure, her estranged brother, Jake, sent shockwaves through her. Their eyes met, his filled with confusion and a hint of protectiveness as he processed the scene unfolding before him. "What are you doing here?" Jake's voice cut through the air, rigid and demanding, the very tension they had sought to resolve now amplified by his presence. Mabel felt a surge of conflicting emotions: angst at Jake's protective instincts and a profound desire for unity. She could sense the immensity of the moment unfolding, the crossroads of their fractured family standing in stark relief. Without waiting for her grandmother's response, Mabel collected her thoughts. "I'm having a conversation that is long overdue," she asserted, her voice steady, fueled by newfound resolve. "This isn't just about you or us anymore, Jake. It's about understanding where we've come from and how we move forward." The tension hung thick in the air, an electric charge as Jake squared his shoulders, clearly grappling with their grandmother's resurfacing and the buried hostilities that had marred their relationships. Mabel's gaze flickered back to her grandmother, whose eyes betrayed a mixture of vulnerability and regret, and in that instant, Mabel realized the weight of this moment. It wasn't merely a confrontation, it was an opportunity to redefine her family's narrative. "I need to know why you left us," Mabel directed her question toward her grandmother, her voice steady and clear, demanding answers like stones cast into the turbulent waters of their history. "What drove you away, and why did you abandon us when we needed you?" Her grandmother's lips quivered as if she had been struck by Mabel's words. For an instant, the past seemed to envelop them: the silence, the absence, the longing. "I thought I was protecting you both," she finally whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "But all I managed to do was push you away." The vulnerability in her grandmother's voice acted as a catalyst, igniting memories within Mabel: the warmth of childhood laughter, the embrace of familial bonds now reduced to echoes. "But it's not just about your choices," Mabel pressed, her heart racing, gathering courage to unravel the complex tapestry of their lives. "We were left with unanswered questions, and that silence grew into scars that still linger." Jake's face softened, as he regarded their grandmother anew, while the reality of their shared pain settled heavily upon them. Mabel could see the cracks in their defenses start to form, the barriers they had constructed slowly simmering under the weight of honesty. She pushed forward. "Mom kept your absence a secret, even when we needed you most. I need to know what you regret and how we can begin anew." Her grandmother took a deep breath, words spilling into the space between them, raw and unfiltered. "I thought you were better off without the chaos I brought into your lives. I was scared of my choices and scared of being a bad mother. I thought I was saving you from the hurt I carried." Beneath the weight of her grandmother's revelations, Mabel felt a flicker of empathy bubbling forth. The patterns of pain that twisted still through their family were intertwined, far more complex than any single choice. We are all here now. Can we not acknowledge the hurt but also find a path forward? She implored, her voice woven with resolve. The air felt charged as Mabel shifted her gaze back to Jake, linking the two, her grandmother and brother. Don't you see? This is our chance to confront the past together. No more silence. No more distractions. Let us forge new paths where we support one another, just as family should. In response, Jake nodded, the distrust that had once governed his demeanor beginning to thaw. Mabel sensed his willingness to step into the light of healing. This moment was not just for her, it was for all of them, the possibility of growth. Untangled from the shadows of their history. Her grandmother wiped unshed tears from her cheeks, gratitude etched in her expression, illuminated by the strength of her granddaughter's words. I want that too. I want to know you both, to make amends before it's too late. Mabel felt an unquenchable sense of triumph swell within her, not because she had encountered the past, but because she had activated empowerment in the presence of the past's most long-winded fears. She recognized herself anew, confidently standing as a proactive participant, ready to rekindle bonds broken by time and circumstance. Together, they started to talk hesitantly at first. Shared memories punctuated the air, spelling out fragmented stories of laughter and amazing grace amidst struggles. With each exchange, the tension gave way to vulnerability, and laughter broke through the barriers that once loomed as insurmountable. A canvas of reconciliation painted from moments of confrontation turned raw emotion beautiful. The cafe buzzed alive around them, unnoticed as they constructed their new path, building foundations stronger than before. As they sat in this tentative space of rebuilding, Mabel felt a warm bouquet of satisfaction blossom in her heart. She had faced confrontations where silence had once reigned, casting light into corners long hidden from view. Through vulnerability, she had rekindled her family, the birthright she had once feared was lost forever. Reflecting on her journey, Mabel came to understand empowerment had emerged from within, allowing her voice to reclaim the narrative, each word a brick laying the groundwork for a path forward saturated with growth. They were united, their journey woven anew, and in reclaiming the past, Mabel realized she had forged her own identity, reconnected with family while seizing her rightful place in its framework. No more ghosts, no more shadows. This was the rebirth of their legacy, bolstered by resilience, love, and a commitment to consciousness. Mabel's heart swelled with deep satisfaction as she marked the first chapter of their evolving family story. As her grandmother reached across the table to hold both her and Jake's hands, Mabel sensed that a profound transformation had indeed taken place, an echo of true strength blooming amidst the threads of unconditional love. As the cafe buzzed on, Mabel's phone buzzed with notifications. Life outside continued, but she remained aware of the importance of this moment. This was her story, her legacy. Rebirth was hers for the taking. Now, it's your moment. Don't miss out on stories of transformation just like this one. Subscribe immediately to the channel to keep coming back for more. Leave a like now to help others discover these life-changing narratives. Your thoughts matter. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Mabel's journey. And you need to share this video with at least 5 friends who need a boost of inspiration. Don't wait even one more second to support personal growth stories like this.